G'day and welcome to another episode of Kiwi Car Life. And while I do really like my Honda Accord, it's not without its flaws and it's not going to be perfect for everybody on the planet. And so today I wanted to discuss some reasons why perhaps you shouldn't buy a Honda Accord. The first reason is value for money. Accord Euroas for starters now are selling for over $20,000, and while I think they're absolutely fantastic, that is just well beyond the limit of what I'd be prepared to pay for a 20-year-old 2-litre Honda, especially when they used to be less than half that 3 years ago. But what about a standard Euro like mine? Well, to be honest, they're not a whole lot better. A subscriber of mine bought the only facelift manual Accord Euro on Trade Me a couple months back, and it set him back $9,000. Gee, even a couple years ago I paid $8,000 for this, and it's not exactly low case. But that said, I still think the Accord Euro is one of the best cars that you can buy for under $10,000. The reason being, the aftermarket support is excellent, the parts you buy for it are quite cheap compared to other brands. You get pretty good gains out of the modifications that you do. Heck, I've gained nearly 30 kilowatt from the modifications I've done to mine, and it's pretty reliable. The problem is, $10,000 plus a few extra and change for modifications puts it squarely in the firing line of cars like the Lexus IS350, the Nissan Skyline GT350, the Legacy 3-litre R, Audi S4, Passat R36, Alfa 159 JTS. Heck, you can even get a BMW 330 or 335i for that kind of money. Now yes, they're not going to be as reliable, but they will do pretty much everything else better. They're going to have a better automatic transmission, they're going to have a lot more power under the bonnet, and a lot more features inside. So if you're not dead set on a manual like me, and you don't really like the idea of spending 20 grand for a slow old Honda, then one of those other cars is probably going to suit you better. The second reason is ability. The Accord Euro, I've long maintained, is a do-everything car. When modified, it's pretty fast, it handles pretty well, it stops decently, makes a pretty good noise, is quite fun to drive, has pretty good steering, transmission, brakes and throttle feel, it's rather practical, has a decent amount of features, is quite comfortable and is reasonably reliable. But it's not outstanding in any area. Even just against the cars that I've compared it to, the 335i was faster, the MRS handles better, the DC5 stops better, the Euro R sounds better, the FD2 had better steering, transmission, brakes and throttle feel. The Celica was more fun to drive, the Caldina was more practical, the 325i had more features, the CP3 was more comfortable, and the Blade will probably be more reliable. And not everyone wants a car that is exactly average in every area, so you've got to decide what's most important to you in a car. And especially if you've got a budget, how much are you willing to spend and what are you willing to sacrifice? If you want something faster, you're going to have to look down the Euro scene or into something Japanese with a big V6 like the IS350 or the Skyline or the Legacy 3-litre R. If you want something that handles better and is more fun to drive, the MRS, the Celica, the Integra, an MX-5, even a Z3 or Z4 or a GT86 are all better options. And if you want something with more features, you'll have to look at just something straight up newer. And the third issue is that it has a couple of issues that are quite expensive to overcome. The first one is the engine. Because Honda never really made a true K24A, it's up to the aftermarket scene to make it for you. And unlike the B16 or the B18 or the K20 or the H22 or the F20C, all of which are Honda's very best from the era, the K24 A2 and A3 make less power than the equivalent K20, so the only advantage they really have out of the box is torque, and they don't sound anywhere near as interesting. So to make the K24 good, you have to spend an awful lot of money. At that point, you got to ask yourself, was I better off just buying a Euro R in the first place? And then the second issue really is the gearbox. The automatic transmission I think is actually pretty good, but frankly, if I was going to get an automatic Accord Euro, I'd get a CU2 because it's just a much nicer car. But even further to that, the ZF6 from the same era is a much better transmission than the one that you find in the Accord Euro. So frankly, if I was looking for an automatic, I'd go out and buy a 325 or a 330i BMW. The manual, on the other hand, well, it's not really much better. You see, a stock manual gearbox in these Accord Euros is not the same as the Euro R or the TSX. It has much longer ratios. The ratios in general annoyed me so much that I actually went out and spent $2,500 to change the ratios out for Type R gears. So effectively what I've created here is a K24 Euro R, and it's brilliant, but it's cost me so much money to get to this point, And even with all the modifications, I'm still getting walked on by a stock 335i. And that really is this car's biggest problem, is that at heart it is a 2.4 litre, naturally aspirated, 4-cylinder, front-wheel drive family sedan. Now, against the cars that it directly competes with, like the 2.3 litre Mazda 3, or the 2.4 litre Camry, or the 2.5 litre Legacy, or BMW 325, it's fantastic. And this engine produces so much more power when you modify it than any of those cars could ever hope to. But if you're looking at it purely on a value perspective, you know, I've spent $18,000 in buying the car and doing all the modifications to it. Now, not all of them are necessary, so let's say to get your car to this point it might cost you, we'll be conservative and say 13 grand. You know, you can't help but look on Trade Me and see all of the cars you could get for 13 grand, or in my case spending nearly 20 grand on this thing. You know, I could get a BMW M135i or a V8 Audi S4, all sorts of really grunty cars that are much better to drive than something like this. So effectively all I've done is I've financed one of those other cars in modifications on my Accord to end up with something that's great, but not 20 grand great. The Accord Euro is a great car, not going to deny that. But if all you care about is speed and power, which is fair enough, then you probably want to look elsewhere. So to conclude, I've been kind of negative in this video and looked at all of the downsides to something like an Accord Euro, but if you want to see 6 reasons why you should buy one of these, then click on the video popping up in the middle right here, and I'll look forward to seeing you again next time.